I used to believe that time could heal almost anything, that if you waited long enough, showed up enough, loved hard enough, the cracks in life would seal themselves. But 6 months ago, I learned the hard truth. Time doesn't heal what someone else is actively trying to break, especially when that someone is the mother of your child. I hadn't seen Ava in person for almost 2 years. Not really. I mean, there were the occasional video calls, some of which ended before they started, others conveniently canceled at the last minute. Technical issues, Raina would say, her voice clipped and rehearsed. Or sometimes, Ava's too tired tonight, maybe next week. But there was always a next week and never a real visit. What I had were fragments, her voice over a speaker, a blurred screen, one time a sleepy "Hi, Daddy," followed by silence and a darkened camera. It wasn't always like this. When Ava was 5, she was my shadow. She'd wrap her arms around my leg like a koala and follow me room to room. She laughed like the world had no edges. We had this bedtime ritual. She'd put her tiny hand on my chest and whisper, "Feel that? That's our secret heartbeat." Then Raina left. She didn't leave quietly, either. She took Ava during one of our trial separations, a weekend that was supposed to be just that, a pause. But she didn't come back. Not with Ava, not with an explanation. Just a text. "I think this is better for all of us. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Her new man, Marcel, was part of it. A yoga-drenched, faux spiritual influencer with a following built on quinoa bowls and fake enlightenment. The man wore beaded necklaces and said things like, "Our frequency isn't in alignment," while he poured himself into Raina's life like he'd invented parenthood. Suddenly, my daughter was being taught about vibrational boundaries and detaching from negativity. I was the negativity. When Ava turned 7, I finally tried to formalize more custody. Raina didn't just resist, she countered with a full custody filing. Said I was unstable, too emotional, and not present enough in Ava's life. She claimed I had unresolved anger, that I'd made Ava nervous and on edge. The truth? I'd gone to therapy after the divorce. I journaled. I meditated. I bit my tongue so often I tasted blood some nights. But that didn't matter to her. In her petition, she attached screenshots from years ago, one text where I'd begged to see Ava, another where I said I felt like I was losing it without my daughter. She used my pain as her proof. The first time I saw Ava again in person was during a brief, court-ordered visit in a supervised facility with fluorescent lights and laminated checklists. She didn't run to me. She sat across the table, her little hands folded like she was in a job interview. I kept my voice soft. "Hey, baby. You remember the secret heartbeat?" Her eyes darted to the wall, then to the woman supervising us. She gave a barely there nod, but she didn't touch her chest. She didn't smile. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. My daughter had learned silence. She'd learned to tuck herself in. In the following weeks, I fought harder. I asked my lawyer if there was anything I could do to get more visitation. But Raina's legal team moved fast and painted me as the aggressor every step of the way. The more I pushed, the more I looked unstable. The more I stayed quiet, the more they said I didn't care. It felt like trying to climb a mountain while someone greased the rocks beneath my feet. But I started to notice something strange during calls. Ava would sometimes lean in and whisper, "Can you hear me?" like we were being watched. One night, I asked her about school. She said she wasn't allowed to talk about it with me. Why not? "Mommy says you wouldn't understand." Another time, I asked what she got for her birthday. She glanced over her shoulder before replying, "I'm not supposed to say." "You'll get mad." "I'll get mad." I asked gently, "Why would I be mad?" She said, "You might yell again." I had never yelled at my daughter. Not once. But I knew what was happening. Raina was crafting a version of me, feeding it to Ava like vitamins, a daily regimen of fear. Little by little, she was replacing our memories with something dark, something distorted. Then, one night, Ava slipped. I asked if she still had the stuffed giraffe I got her, the one she used to sleep with every night. She hesitated, then said, "Mommy threw it out. Said you gave it to me when you were bad." I felt my stomach knot. That giraffe was the last thing Ava hugged before Raina took her away. I had watched her name it, Buttons, and give it a voice. "Do you still want Buttons?" I asked. She nodded. A small nod, but it was enough. "I'll send you another," I said, my throat tightening. Her eyes shimmered, just a little. "I miss you, Daddy," she whispered. And then the screen went black. No explanation. No reconnection. Just gone. The next day, Raina's lawyer filed a restraining request to pause my scheduled visitations. She claimed I was coercing the child emotionally. She said I was planning memories. But I didn't need to plan anything. Ava remembered. She remembered the giraffe. She remembered the heartbeat. And in that moment, I realized something even deeper than hurt. Ava wasn't just confused or caught in the middle. She was surviving something. And she was trying, in her own 7-year-old way, to protect me. From her mother. From the stories. From the silence she'd been forced to carry. That was the day I stopped trying to win a case. I started trying to save my daughter. Courtrooms have a smell. Not just the faint odor of paper, ink, and furniture polish, but a colder scent, something sterile and tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat at the petitioner's table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, every muscle in my body locked in place to keep from shaking. I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of how easily lies could wear perfume and pearls and be mistaken for innocence. Raina walked in like a movie star arriving late to her own redemption arc, hair cascading in warm chestnut curls. Makeup flawless, of course, subtle contour, soft lashes, not too dramatic. Just enough to frame her tears when they came. She wore white, a fitted dress that clung to her carefully calculated frame, and heels that clicked across the floor like punctuation marks. She looked like grace, like grief, like everything she wasn't. Her lawyer, Ms. Bell, had the face of someone who'd spent years spinning stories and winning cases. Everything about her was curated, her tone warm, her words precise, her posture just assertive enough to look trustworthy. They sat across from me and Ava, who was scribbling quietly in her little notebook, knees swinging nervously under her seat. She wore her favorite yellow cardigan, the one with the tiny stitched stars along the sleeves. Her legs didn't quite reach the floor, and her ponytail had started to slip. But she looked braver than I felt. The hearing began like most do. Roll call, recitation of the custody petition, summary of prior arrangements. Judge Ellison. A gray-haired man with glasses that never quite sat right on his nose, read through the documents with practiced detachment. He didn't look up much. Not at me. Not at Raina. Not even when Ms. Bell began her performance. Your Honor, she began, folding her hands as if in prayer. This is a case of stability versus volatility. My client, Ms. Raina Moore, has provided a consistent, nurturing home for Ava. She has supported her emotionally, financially, and educationally. Mr. Mercer, while biologically the father, has a documented history of emotional unpredictability. We are not here to vilify him, but rather to protect the child. I clenched my jaw. Emotional unpredictability. That's how they'd spun my therapy sessions. My grief. My breakdown after Raina left and took Ava without warning. The night I called a friend in tears and said I didn't know who I was without my daughter, that moment was now being weaponized as instability. MS. Belle glanced at me occasionally, like she wanted to see me crack. She wasn't going to get that satisfaction. Raina dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, barely smudging her mascara. I tried to keep the peace, she said, her voice a delicate tremble. I encouraged Ava to love her father. But she would come home anxious, withdrawn. Once she even said he yelled at her in his sleep. She sniffed. I just want her to be safe. Safe. That word stung more than any accusation. I built my world around keeping Ava safe. From long nights when she was sick, to the monsters under her bed, to the first time she asked if I'd ever stop loving her. I was her safe place. But now I was being painted as the threat. The judge shifted, finally looking up. Mr. Mercer, do you have a response? I stood. My voice was steady, but it felt like sandpaper dragging against my throat. I've never raised my voice at my daughter. Not once. I have no criminal record, no history of violence. I've complied with every court order, every visitation schedule, even when they were unjust. I'm not perfect, but I've never been unsafe. The judge nodded, not giving anything away. What's your relationship with your daughter like now? I looked at Ava. She glanced up at me, wide-eyed, then quickly looked down again. I hesitated. It's recovering. I believe she's been told things that aren't true. But I've never stopped loving her or showing up for her. Ms. Bell leaned forward. Your Honor, may I ask a question? He gestured for her to proceed. If the child's relationship with her father is as fractured as described, why would she choose him? What reason would a child give to leave a stable environment? That's when it happened. Raina smiled. Just barely. a flicker of teeth behind her soft lips. Not a grin, not a smirk, just a flash of something too proud to be hidden. Her lawyer noticed, too. She gave the same knowing nod I'd seen before when they thought they were winning. They thought they'd set the stage perfectly, me as the desperate father grasping at a life that had already moved on without him. But they underestimated the girl in the yellow cardigan. Ava stood up. No one prompted her. No one asked her to. She just rose to her feet like the truth had been waiting for its cue. The courtroom stilled. Even Judge Ellison leaned forward. Ava reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out something small. A flash drive. She held it in her palm like a fragile truth. "I have the video," she said quietly. Raina's face went white. Ms. Bell stood. "Your Honor, we object. This wasn't disclosed." Judge Ellison raised his hand. "Sit down." He turned to Ava. "What video?" Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "The one where Mommy says what to lie about. When she thinks I'm asleep." No one moved. I didn't breathe. Ava looked at me for the first time all day, and I saw it, the resolve. The years of silence building to this one moment. Judge Ellison nodded to the bailiff. "Take the device. Let's review it before the recess." Ms. Bell tried again. "This is improper," the judge cut her off. "And if it's fabricated, we'll handle that accordingly. But I want to see it." I sat back down, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. Ava sat next to me again, her hands shaking. I placed mine over hers. She didn't pull away. And just like that, the room shifted. The smile behind the lie cracked. And the truth, 7 years old and brave, finally stood tall enough to be seen. You don't notice the small shifts at first. Not when you're trying so hard to believe everything is normal. The subtle way your child flinches when a voice rises on TV. The way they hesitate before answering simple questions, glancing over their shoulder like the walls themselves might report back. Ava's world had become a careful place, and I was slow to see it, because I was desperate to believe the time I was getting with her was enough. I remember the first time I noticed the change in her voice. She'd just arrived for a weekend visit, carrying that pink backpack with the frayed zipper, hugging it tight like it was armor. She barely let go of it as she walked into my apartment. I knelt down to take it from her shoulders like I always did, but her fingers didn't uncurl. "Hey, it's okay," I said softly. She just nodded, then whispered, "Do I have to go back to Mommy's house?" I almost didn't hear her. The words were like breath caught on air, fragile and cautious. I froze. "What did you say, baby?" She looked at me, eyes wide, lips pinched together like she'd said too much already. Then she shook her head quickly, changing the subject. "Can we watch the one with the dog that talks?" We did. We sat on the couch and watched the talking dog movie, and she laughed in all the right places, but something stayed tight in her body. Her feet didn't kick like they used to. She didn't lean into me when she got sleepy. When bedtime came, she asked if she could sleep with the light on. Ava had never been afraid of the dark before. I brushed it off at first. Thought maybe it was just a phase, post-divorce nerves, the usual growing pains. Kids feel things deeply. They react to change in ways we don't always understand. That's what I told myself. Until I found the drawings. They were shoved between the pages of one of her old coloring books. I wasn't snooping. I'd been cleaning up the living room after she fell asleep. The drawings weren't neat like her usual ones. These were frantic, pencil lines thick and layered, faces with jagged mouths and sharp eyebrows. One had the word liar written in shaky handwriting next to a woman in a tall red dress. Another showed a little girl hiding under a bed. I sat there staring at them, my heart beating like I'd been running. This wasn't a phase. Something was happening. Something Ava didn't know how to talk about yet, but her hands were drawing the truth. The next morning, I made pancakes, her favorite, with blueberries and the little whipped cream smiley face. She picked at them like they were a chore. I tried to keep my voice light. "You made some powerful drawings last night. Want to talk about them?" She dropped her fork. It clattered against the plate. "I didn't mean to leave them," she mumbled. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart," I said gently. "I just want to understand. That woman in the red dress, is that someone you know?" She looked down, then very softly said, "It's just a story." I let it go. Not because I believed her, but because pushing her in that moment would have only sent her deeper into herself. Ava wasn't just drawing her fears. She was hiding them in plain sight, trying to be brave and quiet at the same time. Later that day, I heard her in the bathroom, talking softly to herself. I thought she might be playing pretend, the way she used to with her stuffed giraffe, Buttons. But as I listened closer, I realized she was repeating something. You say Daddy yells. You say Daddy forgets. You say Daddy's bad. You say Daddy's bad. I pushed the door open gently. Ava stood by the sink, not crying, just staring at her reflection. When she saw me, she jumped and turned away quickly. Were you practicing something? I asked. She didn't answer. I knelt down beside her. Did someone tell you to say those things? After a long pause, she nodded. My stomach dropped. I wanted to ask who, but I already knew. I could hear Raina's voice in my head, sweet and slippery like honey over poison. It's just the story we have to tell for now. She had always been good at that, rehearsing reality, rewriting facts to suit her narrative. But I never thought she'd pull Ava into the act like a co-star in her performance. The worst came when Ava accidentally let something slip during a bedtime story. I'd just finished reading her favorite book, the one about the fox who learns to be brave, and I tucked her in tight. Her eyes fluttered closed, her fingers curled around her teddy bear. That's when she said it. Mommy says you'll lose because you're poor. I sat there frozen. The warmth of the moment sucked out like a vacuum had opened above the bed. What? I asked, barely above a whisper. She opened her eyes again, already looking guilty. Nothing. I didn't mean to say that. Is that what Mommy tells you? Ava stared at the ceiling. Sweetheart, money doesn't decide who loves you more. You know that, right? She nodded slowly, but I could tell she didn't believe it. The damage had been done. Not just the words, but the repetition of them. The constant, invisible campaign Raina had launched, whisper by whisper, planting doubt like seeds. And they had started to take root. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch replaying everything. The drawings, the whispers, the stiffness in Ava's hugs. I realized then that this custody battle wasn't about parenting. It wasn't even about Ava. It was about power, control. Raina didn't want to raise Ava, she wanted to own her. To turn her into proof. A walking, talking symbol that Raina had won. I made a promise to myself that night. No matter how messy it got, no matter how much mud they tried to throw at me, I wouldn't back down. I wouldn't let Ava keep living in a world where truth was treated like a mistake, where love was used as a lever. Ava was trying to protect me, yes. But more than that, she was trying to protect herself. And now, it was my turn to do the same for her. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't scream. It smiles. It poses for pictures. It wears tiny matching outfits and caption-ready grins. That's the kind of loneliness Ava was living in, and I didn't fully see it until I scrolled through Raina's social media one afternoon, trying to piece together what kind of world my daughter was being told to call home. Raina's page was a carefully curated performance. Every photo was edited just enough to be glossy but not fake. There were brunches with white plates and mimosa flutes, yoga poses on oceanside cliffs, and Ava, always Ava, smiling in designer clothes that didn't look anything like what a child would choose for herself. Her hair was always perfect. Her hands neatly folded. Her smile the same in every frame. Polite. Distant. Posed. In one post, Ava stood next to Marcel, the man who'd helped Raina vanish with my daughter. He crouched beside her, hand on her shoulder like they were father and daughter. The caption read, Our little angel. Brunching with love. But her eyes told the truth. Ava looked like she was trying to disappear behind her own smile. That's when the rage hit me. Not the loud, violent kind. The quiet kind that simmers low and steady. The kind that feels like someone poured hot tar into your chest and told you to walk calmly through the world. I had no Instagram photos to show. No luxury charter school or palm tree-lined driveways. My apartment was small. Just a one-bedroom with warm light, scuffed hardwood floors, and the smell of garlic that lingered no matter how many candles I lit. I didn't have polished updates or branded holidays, but I had her favorite cereal waiting in the pantry. I had her drawings taped to the fridge, even the ones where she'd colored outside the lines. I had space for her stuffed animals and a hand-painted nightlight with stars that danced across the ceiling when she slept. I had memories. Real ones. Messy ones. But none of that was admissible in court. Raina's lawyer presented glossy prints of Ava's life, pictures blown up and mounted like evidence in a marketing pitch. This is the environment she's thriving in, MS. Bell declared. It's stable, enriched, and consistent. Every image had been picked with surgical precision. Ava holding books. Ava petting rescue animals. Ava planting herbs in the backyard with Marcel, like she was starring in a suburban dream. The judge flipped through them slowly, nodding. He didn't ask how long Ava had cried the night before one of those pictures was taken. He didn't ask who took the photo or if Ava even liked that outfit. He saw a clean lawn and smiling adults and checked boxes in his mind. Meanwhile, my apartment, the one with love built into its walls, was framed as a symbol of failure. Mr. Mercer lives in a one-bedroom unit with no outdoor access and limited resources, Belle continued. He means well, but love without stability can be chaotic for a child. I wanted to scream, but I knew better. Every outburst was another brick in the wall they were trying to build between Ava and me. So I sat there in that courtroom while they painted me as a man barely getting by, and I waited for anyone, to ask Ava what she wanted. But no one did. Not until she found a way to tell them herself. It started with a painting, one she made at school during an art class. Her teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Lennox, had sent it home in her backpack, tucked between worksheets and permission slips. Ava gave it to me on a Friday afternoon when I picked her up for our scheduled visit. "I painted our kitchen," she said. "At your house." The canvas was streaked with colors, swirls of blue for the tile, a crooked rectangle for the table, two stick figures dancing in the corner. One tall, one small, both smiling wide, with little music notes floating around them. "You remembered the silly dance," I said, grinning. "It's the best part," she replied simply. That's when it hit me. Ava didn't care about curated perfection. She didn't want staged moments or perfectly timed lighting. She wanted the kitchen dance, the burnt pancakes, the bedtime stories where I used funny voices and changed the endings. She wanted messy, unscripted love, but the world around her kept telling her those things weren't enough. That money made love real. That status meant safety. Still, Ava held on to her little truths like seeds in a storm. During one visit, she asked me what image meant. "Why?" I asked, curious. "Mommy says I have to protect her image," she said, chewing on the sleeve of her cardigan. I leaned down, careful not to look alarmed. "Did she say what happens if you don't?" Ava looked away. "She says people won't believe her anymore. And she says they already don't believe you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You don't have to protect anyone's image, baby. You're not a picture frame. You're a person." She didn't respond. But her eyes searched mine like she was trying to decide if I was telling the truth, or if I was just another adult trying to make her pick a side. That night, as she fell asleep on my couch wrapped in her favorite pink blanket, I sat beside her and realized something heartbreaking. Ava was being raised in two homes, but only one of them made space for her voice. The other was a stage. A few days later, she returned to Raina's house, and the video calls started dropping again. Shorter. Less frequent. One time, Ava whispered, I hid the drawing. The one with the stars. Why? I asked. Because Mommy said stars are a waste of time. That they don't pay the bills. I tried to laugh it off, but it hurt. What kind of world tells a child that their imagination is worthless? I knew then we weren't fighting for custody anymore. We were fighting for identity. For a little girl's right to color outside the lines. To dance in the kitchen. To draw stars without permission. And I would not let her be trapped in a picture frame built by someone else's vanity. Not now. Not ever. It was a quiet night, the kind that could fool you into thinking everything in the world was finally right. The apartment was bathed in soft lamplight. Outside, the city buzz had dimmed into background hum. Ava sat curled up beside me on the couch, her little legs tucked beneath her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a cape. The butterfly tablet rested in her lap. The same pink one I'd bought her for her 6th birthday, now protected by a thick rubber case with sparkly wings on the back. It had survived more drops than I could count, but it was still her favorite thing in the world. She never let it out of her sight. She was quieter than usual. We had just finished watching an old animated movie she used to love, but she barely giggled during the funny parts. Every now and then, she'd glance at me and then quickly look away, like she was trying to gather courage for something. You okay? I asked, brushing a loose curl from her forehead. She nodded too quickly. Uh-huh. I waited. One thing I'd learned over the past few months was that silence wasn't just silence. It was a hallway. If you waited long enough and stayed still enough, sometimes a child would walk you through it. Daddy, she finally said, voice small. Is it okay to record someone if they're doing something wrong? I felt my stomach tighten. The question came out too carefully, too rehearsed. What do you mean, sweetheart? She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the tablet case. Just like if someone's saying something mean, but they don't know they're being watched. My throat went dry. I didn't want to assume. I didn't want to leap ahead and land in fear. Did something happen? She didn't answer. She just tapped the tablet screen, waking it up. The butterfly logo pulsed, then faded. She opened a folder hidden beneath layers of drawing apps and coloring games. The icon was a simple one, just a folder marked with a star. Inside, there were videos. Dozens of them. Some only seconds long. Others over a minute. All time-stamped from late nights and early mornings, odd hours when Ava should have been asleep. She opened one. The screen showed a dimly lit room. Her room, from the angle of her bed. The camera must have been propped up against a pillow. The video was grainy, but the audio was clear. Raina's voice filled the room like poison poured into water. I don't care what he says. You'll say your father forgets to feed you. Got it? You'll say he gets mad and yells and scares you. You don't have to believe it. Just say it. I need that custody check. I need the court to believe you're better off here. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ava's hand slipped into mine, trembling. My other hand gripped the couch cushion, my knuckles going white. There was another video. In it, Raina paced back and forth, talking on the phone. No, she's not scared of him. She loves him. That's the problem. I have to undo it. You should have seen her face when he gave her that stupid giraffe. She wouldn't stop crying when I threw it out. The next clip was shorter. Raina standing at the edge of the bed, whispering harshly. The more sad you look in court, the better I look. Think about that. Cry if you can. Don't smile. If you smile, I swear the video cut off. I sat frozen. Ava looked at me. She didn't know the tablet was on, she whispered. I had it under the blanket. How long have you been doing this? I asked, barely able to speak. Since Christmas, she said, eyes downcast. She started saying I had to choose, that I had to help her win. But I didn't want to say bad things about you, Daddy. I didn't want to lie. A lump lodged in my throat. You shouldn't have had to carry this, Ava. She wiped at her nose with her sleeve. I thought if I showed you, you'd believe me. You always say the truth doesn't need help. It just needs a chance to speak. I smiled through the pain. Yeah, I did say that. And she had remembered. Somehow, through everything, she held on to that. I sat there, watching her look down at the tablet, this small pink rectangle that had become both her shield and her sword. What kind of world asks a child to become their own witness? She leaned her head on my shoulder, finally relaxing. Will this help? In court. I wrapped my arm around her gently. Yeah, baby. It will help. A lot. But beneath the certainty of my words, a knot of dread formed. This wasn't just a piece of evidence. This was a child's private suffering, captured on video. And now it was up to me to use it, to protect her. Yes, but to also take her voice and place it in a system that didn't always listen. You're very brave, I whispered. Braver than most adults I know. She nodded. I don't want to be scared anymore. You don't have to be. Not now. Not ever again. We sat there in silence, the weight of truth finally beginning to lift. But I knew the hardest part hadn't come yet. We still had to show this to someone who could do something about it. Someone who would believe not just the images on the screen, but the small girl who pressed record in the dark when no one was watching. Later that night, after I tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead, I went into the kitchen and played the videos again. I took notes. I saved backup copies. And then I made a call to a lawyer a college friend had recommended months ago. A woman named Leona Cruz. I had hesitated then, afraid to escalate, afraid of how the court might view me. But not anymore. This wasn't about my pride. It wasn't about my image. It was about Ava's right to be heard. Without fear. Without manipulation. Her truth had been trapped in a butterfly tablet for months. Now, it was time to set it free. The first time I walked into Leona Cruz's office, I didn't feel like a man with a case. I felt like a father drowning in quiet panic, clutching a pink tablet like it held the last lifeboat. The receptionist looked up as I entered, then offered a kind smile, probably trained, probably automatic, but it helped. I clutched the butterfly tablet tighter under my arm like it might disappear if I let go. Mr. Mercer, a voice called gently from a doorway. Come in. Leona Cruz was not what I expected. She didn't look like she spent her days fighting inside courtrooms or writing cold legal arguments. She looked like someone who could sit at a kitchen table and read people before they spoke. She had sharp eyes, dark curls pinned back in a bun, and no patience for wasted time. Her handshake was firm. Her tone, calm. Let's talk. I sat down across from her and placed the tablet on the table between us like an offering. I need you to watch something, I said. And I need you to understand before we talk about anything else. She didn't blink. Just tapped the screen when I unlocked the folder and hit play. The first video was the short one, Raina's voice slicing through the room as she coached Ava to lie. Leona leaned forward, elbows on the desk, and didn't look away. The second clip rolled, then a third. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched her face. By the time the video ended, her jaw was set tight. She exhaled slowly and sat back, letting silence stretch between us. She thought Ava was asleep, I finally said. But she wasn't. She recorded it. All of it. Leona nodded once. How old is your daughter again? 7. And she did this on her own? Yes. She told me she couldn't lie anymore. She said she wanted someone to know. Leona turned her chair slightly, reaching for a legal pad. We'll use it, she said. But carefully. The court doesn't always welcome surprises, especially from children. The goal isn't just shock. It's credibility. I don't want to make this harder for Ava, I said quickly. She's already been through too much. That's why we're not throwing this into a courtroom like a grenade, Leona replied. We'll build it around her truth. Not just the video, but a pattern. A story that makes sense, one they can't ignore. She started outlining a strategy, calm, measured, surgical. She spoke with the confidence of someone who'd seen enough heartbreak and custody battles to know the law rarely moved in straight lines. She talked about how judges often lean toward status quo unless presented with compelling evidence. About how mothers like Raina, who dress their lies in luxury, often pass the first few layers of scrutiny unscathed. But this, Leona said, gesturing toward the tablet, this isn't just compelling. It's corrosive. If we handle it right, it won't just prove she's lying. It'll prove Ava's been manipulated. My stomach churned. What if they say she was coached? That I planted it? They'll try, she said. That's why we won't rely on the video alone. We'll use Ava's drawings, school records, even testimony from teachers if we need to. I'll file a motion to compel a review of Raina's behavioral history. Any past complaints from teachers, neighbors, everything. We'll let the pattern tell the story, and the video will become the conclusion they can't ignore. Her words felt like the first oxygen I'd breathed in months. Then came the hardest part, discussing Ava's involvement. She may need to answer questions, Leona said, gently now. We'll protect her from cross-examination, but the judge will want to hear her perspective in some form. That might mean a child psychologist. It might mean an in-chambers discussion. She's scared, I admitted. But she said she wants to speak. Leona softened slightly. Then we'll prepare her. Carefully. This isn't about turning her into a witness. It's about helping her feel safe enough to be heard. We spent the next 2 hours talking through strategy. Leona asked for every detail, dates, visitation notes, Ava's statements, canceled calls, even the drawings she'd hidden in her backpack. I pulled out everything. All of it. Every scrap of paper, every napkin drawing, every crumpled coloring page where Ava had tried to express what she couldn't yet say out loud. Leona didn't dismiss any of it. She looked at each piece like it was part of a puzzle she was determined to finish. By the time I left her office, the sun was already dipping behind the buildings, casting the street in long amber streaks. I stepped out holding the tablet tighter than ever. But this time, it didn't feel like I was carrying a secret. It felt like I was carrying a weapon, not to hurt, but to defend. That night, back home, I sat with Ava at the kitchen table. She was drawing again. More stars, this time in bold yellows and purples. The fear had eased a little since she'd shown me the videos. There was more air in her voice now, more weight in her smile. Do you remember the lawyer I told you about? I asked. She nodded, coloring carefully. The one with the strong voice? That's the one. I showed her the videos. Ava stopped coloring. Did she believe me? I leaned forward. Not only did she believe you, sweetheart. She said they're going to remember what you said for the rest of their lives. Ava smiled, shy but proud. So, do I still have to go to court? Maybe, I said honestly. But we'll practice, and we'll make sure you never have to do it alone. She set her crayon down. Okay, I want them to know. I want them to know I'm not lying. I reached out and squeezed her hand gently. They'll know, because the truth doesn't need help. It just needs a chance to speak. She repeated the words softly, like a song she'd memorized. Later, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me and said, Do you think the judge will listen to kids? I think the judge will listen to you. She smiled. Good. Because I'm ready now. And in that moment, I didn't see a scared little girl anymore. I saw a 7-year-old preparing to stand taller than any adult in the room. The days leading up to the final hearing weren't peaceful. They were calculated storms, each hour carrying some new form of manipulation, each day with a different type of silence to navigate. Raina didn't wait for the courtroom to launch her next attack. She made our lives into a pressure chamber, and she aimed every trick she had directly at Ava. It started with voicemails, long, drawn-out recordings where she cried into the phone and begged me to be decent. "Don't make Ava go through this," she said, like it hadn't been her pushing our daughter to rehearse lies in the first place. "Don't destroy what little stability she has left." Some nights, she'd call multiple times. Other nights, it was her lawyer, Ms. Bell, firing off emails with thinly veiled threats, reminders about defamation, questions about Ava's mental state, implications that I was emotionally coaching a child too fragile to speak for herself. I saved everything. Still, the worst came from Raina herself. Not to me, but to Ava. Ava had been getting stronger. She'd been speaking more, sleeping more peacefully, humming to herself while coloring like the fear had started lifting off her tiny shoulders. But when she came back from her final weekend with her mother before the hearing, I saw the change immediately. She walked through the front door with her head down, clutching her backpack to her chest. She didn't run to hug me like she usually did. Her shoes were untied. Her lip had a small cut at the corner, probably from biting it too hard. She dropped her backpack on the couch and just stood there. "Ava," I said, kneeling down gently. "What's wrong, baby?" She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with wide, glassy eyes and whispered. She said I'll ruin everything. I froze. "Who?" "Mommy," she whispered. "She said if I talk, I'll break our family. That people will hate her. That everything will go bad forever." It took every ounce of control not to let my voice crack. I pulled her close and held her, pressing my cheek to her head, feeling her heart race beneath my hands. "You didn't ruin anything," I said softly. "Telling the truth doesn't break things, sweetheart. It reveals what's already broken." She nodded slowly, but her body stayed tense in my arms. That night, she wet the bed for the first time in months. She sobbed when she woke up, begging me not to be mad. I told her it was okay, that none of this was her fault, but I could feel the spiral beginning again, Raina's words turning into shadows in Ava's mind. I considered pulling the video, dropping the whole thing, letting it go. Maybe the fight wasn't worth it if it was going to crush Ava in the process. But the next evening changed everything. I came home from work and found her sitting at the kitchen table with her teddy bear in her lap, looking out the window. Her drawings were spread across the table. Some of them were old ones I hadn't seen in weeks. One of them was the kitchen dance picture, the stick figures spinning under ceiling stars. "Hey," I said gently. "What you thinking about?" She looked up, steadier than I expected. "I want to show them," she said. "The judge. Everyone." I sat across from her. "Are you sure? You don't have to. I'll always protect you, no matter what you decide." She looked down at the bear, stroking its matted fur. "Mommy said if I tell the truth, she'll cry. She said people will say mean things about her." I nodded slowly. "That might happen. Some people might not like what you say. But the ones who matter, the ones who love you, they'll never stop loving you for telling the truth." She thought for a long moment, then said, "I want them to know who she really is. I'm not scared anymore." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not defiance, not anger, clarity. That night, Leona came over to help us rehearse again. We'd already been practicing for days, gentle Q&A sessions in the living room, role-playing conversations with the judge, guiding Ava through what it would feel like to be watched, to be heard. But this time, it wasn't just rehearsal. It felt different. Leona sat beside Ava on the couch and asked her the same questions as before. "What do you like to do with your dad? Do you feel safe with him? Can you tell me a time you felt scared?" Ava answered each one clearly, her hands folded in her lap, her voice soft but steady. Then Leona asked, "Why do you want the judge to know your story?" Ava paused, then said, "Because I want to live with the parent who listens." Leona blinked. She didn't write that down. She didn't have to. It hung in the room like a statement of fact. After Ava went to bed, Leona and I sat in the kitchen. She was silent for a long time, then finally said, "She's ready." I let out a slow breath. I wasn't sure she'd be able to do it. She's already doing it. She's not just telling the truth, she's reclaiming it. And if the judge has a shred of sense, he'll see that. I nodded, eyes burning. What if he doesn't? Leona gave me a rare, wry smile. Then I'll appeal until he does. But something tells me he will. The next morning, Ava woke up early. She got dressed without me asking, picked out her yellow cardigan, the same one she wore during the last hearing, and sat by the door with her backpack. You okay? I asked, crouching next to her. I'm ready, she said, and handed me the butterfly tablet. I took it carefully, swallowing the lump in my throat. She smiled. Don't forget it. I won't, I promised. And with that, we left the house, side by side. No longer rehearsing. Just ready. The courtroom felt colder than I remembered. Not the kind of cold that came from faulty air conditioning, but something deeper, a chill that settled between the ribs, numbing everything it touched. Ava and I walked in hand, her yellow cardigan buttoned to the very top, her fingers gripping mine just a little tighter than usual. We took our seats at the respondents' table. Leona Cruz sat beside us, calm as stone. She gave Ava a small nod, and Ava returned it, nervous, but ready. Across from us, Raina looked like she'd been airbrushed into existence. Hairstyled in effortless waves, pearl earrings that matched the gleam on her polished nails, and that white dress, a statement of purity, of motherhood, of weaponized grace. She sat perfectly straight beside her attorney, Ms. Bell, who scanned the room with the easy confidence of someone who thought she'd already won. Judge Ellison entered, and the room stood. He adjusted his glasses and took his seat behind the bench, his expression unreadable. He glanced down at the case file, then at the faces in front of him. Let's continue, he said, his voice clipped. We're here for the continuation of custody proceedings between Raina Moore and Jacob Mercer. Counsel, proceed. Ms. Bell rose immediately, her heels clacking like gavel strikes across the floor. Your Honor, my client has maintained a stable, nurturing home for her daughter. She's provided consistency, educational support, and emotional care. Meanwhile, Mr. Mercer, though clearly invested, has struggled to demonstrate the kind of structure required for primary custody. She motioned toward Raina, who gave a perfectly timed nod and dabbed her eye with a handkerchief. It would have been convincing if I hadn't seen her rehearsing it in front of a mirror once. We asked the court to consider what's best for the child, Ms. Bell continued. Not what feels fair to the parents. And what's best is stability, proven care, and yes, the mother's intuition and sacrifice. She returned to her seat like she'd just finished delivering a graduation speech. Judge Ellison looked at us. Mr. Mercer, your counsel may respond. Leona stood without rushing. Your Honor, she began smoothly, what my client lacks in curated optics, he more than makes up for in authenticity and devotion. We don't deny that Ms. Moore's lifestyle looks appealing, but parenting isn't an Instagram filter. It's what happens behind closed doors when the cameras are off. A murmur ran through the room. Raina stiffened. Leona let the silence settle before continuing. We'd like to enter a video into evidence, she said, holding up a small USB. Provided to us by the minor child, filmed without coercion, showing Ms. Moore's behavior in the presumed privacy of her home. Ms. Bell sprang up. Your Honor, we object. This material was not submitted during discovery. It's inadmissible. Judge Ellison held up a hand. Ms. Cruz, was the footage in question obtained legally? Yes, Your Honor, Leona replied calmly. The child recorded it herself on her personal device. No laws were broken. Ms. Bell tried again, her voice sharper. We have no way to authenticate the context of these videos. Children are impressionable. She wasn't coached, Ava said suddenly. The room stilled. Everyone turned. Even the judge leaned forward. Ava stood, small and resolute in her yellow cardigan, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried. I have the video, and I wasn't coached. I recorded it because I didn't want to lie anymore. Judge Ellison looked at her gently. You understand that what you're saying is serious? Ava nodded. Yes, sir. I just want to tell the truth. Leona handed the USB to the bailiff. The judge motioned toward the screen on the far wall. Play the video. The screen flickered, and the grainy footage filled the courtroom. Raina's voice came first, sharp, demanding. You'll say your father forgets to feed you. Got it? You'll say he yells. You don't have to believe it. Just say it. I need that custody check. Cry if you can. The more sad you look in court, the better I look. Gasps echoed. The gallery behind us shifted in their seats. Raina's painted expression cracked, just slightly. The next clip played. She was on the phone, pacing. She still loves him? Can you believe that? I have to fix it. She can't keep holding on to that stupid giraffe. I threw it out. She cried for 3 hours. Idiot kid. Another gasp. The final clip showed Raina leaning close to Ava's bed, whispering venom. You say what I tell you to say. You mess this up, and you're going to ruin everything. Don't you dare smile in court. If you love me, you'll help me win. The video ended. Silence. No one moved. Even the court clerk stared at the blank screen like it might start playing again. Ava sat down slowly, her eyes on her shoes. Judge Ellison cleared his throat. He was no longer unreadable. He looked stunned, and then angry. He turned to Ms. Bell. Do you wish to explain your client's behavior? Ms. Bell stood, her voice faltering for the first time. Your Honor, we question the authenticity of sit down, the judge snapped. I don't need further spin. He turned to Raina, who was pale now, her hands trembling slightly. Ms. Moore, your behavior as seen in those videos is not only reprehensible, it is emotionally damaging to your child. This court exists to protect the welfare of minors, not the egos of their parents. He glanced at Ava. Young lady, thank you for your bravery. Your voice matters here. Ava didn't smile. She just nodded quietly. Judge Ellison turned back to us. The video evidence, coupled with the child's clear statement and the supporting documentation, gives this court more than enough reason to make a decision. He paused, then spoke with finality. This court awards full physical and legal custody to Mr. Jacob Mercer, effective immediately. Ms. Moore's visitation will be suspended pending mandatory completion of a court-approved parenting course and psychological evaluation. The gavel came down. Bang. Just like that, the fight was over. Raina shouted something, accused me of manipulating our daughter, of fabricating the whole thing. But no one listened. Not anymore. Ava turned toward me slowly. I reached for her hand. She looked across the courtroom, straight at her mother, and said, I didn't lie. You just didn't think I'd show them. And in that moment, I didn't care who saw my tears. Because my daughter, my warrior, had just changed everything. The silence after the gavel fell didn't feel like peace. It felt like the breath you hold in your chest before you let yourself believe the danger has truly passed. I didn't move. Couldn't. For a full 5 seconds, I sat frozen in that chair, Ava's small hand wrapped tightly in mine, as if releasing it would cause the world to reset and undo the judgment we just heard. Judge Ellison rose from the bench and disappeared behind his chamber door, and with him, the weight of deliberation vanished too. All that remained was the echo of his ruling. Full custody. Effective immediately. My body caught up with the moment a second later. Leona put her hand on my shoulder, squeezing once. She didn't say anything she didn't need to. Her work was done. Her presence had been steady, calm, unshakable throughout all of it. But this time, even she looked like the wind had been knocked from her. That's what truth can do when it's finally heard. It doesn't shout. It settles deep. Across the room, Ms. Bell was already packing her files, eyes cast down, her mouth tight with professional defeat. She didn't glance at Raina once. And Raina looked like someone who had just realized the mirror was two-sided. She stood there, arms stiff at her sides, fury swirling just beneath her glassy, cracked expression. Her lips parted. This is insane, she hissed. You all saw what he did. He manipulated her. He used her. That video could have been staged. I stood slowly, positioning myself between her and Ava. You're not going to talk to her, I said. Not now. You're a liar, she snapped, her voice rising as the gallery behind us began to thin. You coached her into that. You filled her head with garbage and turned her against me. Ava looked up at me, alarmed, then back at her mother. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. I didn't lie, Ava said, her voice soft but solid. You just didn't think I'd show them. The room paused again. Raina's mouth opened, then closed, as if she was searching for the script and couldn't find the next line. The audience she always counted on, the legal system, her lawyer, the quiet nods of approval she used to collect, was gone. She turned and stormed out of the courtroom. No applause followed. No final word. Just the sharp clack of her heels as she vanished down the hall. Ava leaned into me, and I held her for a long time, pressing my hand gently to the back of her head like I could shield her from everything she'd just witnessed. It wasn't how I'd imagined winning. There was no euphoria. No celebration. Just the quiet thud of exhaustion. I'm okay, Ava whispered. I pulled back slightly to look at her. You sure? She nodded. I want to go home. Our home. And that was the moment it started to settle in. This was real. The nightmare wasn't looming anymore. The courtroom wasn't a looming threat. I could take my daughter home without counting down the minutes or fearing another change of custody call. I could cook dinner without wondering if it would be our last meal together for a month. I could tuck her in without a timer. Leona helped us gather our things. She walked us to the courthouse exit, then paused on the steps. You did good, she said to Ava. Ava gave her a small, shy smile. Thank you for helping me. Leona smiled back. You helped yourself. Most kids don't get to be brave the way you were. But you did it. As we stepped outside, the sunlight felt different. I hadn't realized how long I'd been living under the fluorescent flicker of courtrooms and supervised visits. The world looked wider now. I took Ava for ice cream on the way home, strawberry swirl with gummy bears on top, her choice. She smiled as she ate, her knees swinging from the bench outside the shop like they were learning how to feel light again. I didn't rush her. I just watched. On the drive home, Ava rested her head against the window and asked, Will I have to see her again? I kept my eyes on the road. Not for a long while. The judge said she has to take classes and meet with people who can help her before she's allowed to visit. Ava nodded. Okay. And you get to say how you feel every time. Nobody will make you go if you don't want to. Not ever again. Silence. Then she whispered, Good. Back at the apartment, the routine was different. There was no packing of bags, no checklist for drop-offs. Her things were home now. Permanently. She walked into her room and stood there for a long moment, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. Her paintings still lined the wall. Her books still waited on the shelf. Buttons, the second version of him, the one I gave her after she lost the first, sat on the pillow, arms open like a welcome. She climbed into bed that night after a long bath, hair damp, fingers pruny. I tucked her in, the blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Daddy, she said as I turned off the lamp. Yeah, are we safe now? I sat beside her on the edge of the bed. Yes, I said. We're safe. You're safe. And no one gets to take that away from you ever again. She reached out and placed her hand on my chest. Secret heartbeat, she whispered. I smiled, tears stinging the back of my eyes. You still remember? I never forgot, she murmured. And neither would I. That night, as I lay in bed in the next room, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, I didn't dream about courtrooms or fights or legal filings. I dreamt of Ava running through a field of stars she'd drawn herself. Laughing. Free. The verdict hadn't just given me custody. It gave Ava back her voice. And it gave me back my daughter. 2 months later, our home felt like a place again. Not just a stopgap between battles, not a bunker from legal fire, but a place with rhythm. A place with laughter. A place with silence that wasn't heavy. I'd wake up in the morning to the smell of blueberry waffles Ava tried to make herself, the batter always lumpy, the counter always dusted with flour. She'd call it her Saturday surprise. And I'd eat every crooked waffle like it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. She'd started humming again, drawing more. The stick figures in her notebooks smiled now, arms stretched toward the sun instead of curled into themselves. She started putting little hearts on everything, napkins, sticky notes, the corner of the grocery list. Just in case you forget you're loved, she told me once, matter of fact, as if that was something people needed to be reminded of in writing. Sometimes she still asked about her mother. Quietly, carefully. Do you think she misses me? I never lied. Maybe, I'd say. But even if she doesn't, I know she's thinking about you. Because you're impossible to forget. Ava nodded like she was old enough to carry complicated truths, and maybe she was. The court had granted us a 3-year no-contact clause after Raina failed to begin the mandated parenting course. No check-ins, no drop-ins, no letters unless they came through a court monitor. Marcel left the state with her, and that was that. Ava didn't cry. She didn't ask to call her. She just started sleeping through the night again. There was one evening, mid-October, where she climbed onto the couch beside me, tablet in hand. She didn't open it, just held it on her lap like a storybook waiting to be read. The butterfly case was still intact, though the glitter had faded around the edges from use and time. She looked at me with those wide, thoughtful eyes and said, Do you think the judge still remembers me? I turned to face her. I think everyone in that courtroom remembers you. She tilted her head. Even the ones who didn't believe me at first. especially them. She didn't say anything for a while. The tablet stayed closed. Then she said, I still have the videos. I don't watch them, but I didn't delete them either. I nodded. That's okay. Is it weird that I don't want to forget what happened? No, I said. It means you're brave enough to remember. She sat back, curling her feet beneath her. Sometimes I don't even feel angry anymore. Just like I walked out of a movie I didn't like. And now I'm back in the real one. That stayed with me. Her voice, once hesitant and full of second guesses, had become something steady. She no longer asked if she was right for telling the truth. She just knew it. She carried it like armor. Not to fight, but to walk without fear. One night, after a school project on family heritage, she asked if I'd help her write a letter to the judge. I want to say thank you, she said. So we sat at the dining table. She picked out the stationery herself. A soft lavender page with little silver stars at the corners. She wrote, Dear Judge Ellison, thank you for listening to me when I was scared. You didn't have to, but you did. I get to live with my dad now and sleep all the way through the night. I like school more, and I have a new best friend named Piper who likes drawing cats. I hope you remember me. I remember you. Thank you for believing I was telling the truth. Love, Ava Mercer. I didn't correct a single word. We mailed the letter 2 days later. That weekend, she invited Piper over. They ran through the apartment laughing, turning pillows into forts and baking cookies that burned at the edges. Piper asked, Where's your mom? At one point, the way kids do, curious but without malice. Ava answered without hesitation, She's not here, but my dad's got enough love for 2 parents. It's okay. I was in the kitchen when I heard that. I stopped mid-stir. And for a moment, all I could do was let the tears come, quietly, into the mixing bowl. On the first weekend of December, Ava and I decorated the living room for the holidays. She insisted on doing the lights herself. When we finished, she stood back and declared, It's not perfect, but it's happy. That became our motto for everything. The tree was crooked. Her gifts were wrapped with too much tape. My hot chocolate always had too many marshmallows. But everything was happy. Christmas morning, she handed me a small wrapped box with a red ribbon. Inside was a keychain she'd made at school. It was a wooden heart with one word burned into it. Listens. She pointed at it with a proud smile. Remember what I said in court? That you're the one who listens when I whisper. I remember, I said, holding the keychain like it was made of gold. She hugged me tightly. You're still the one who listens. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she pulled the covers up to her chin and looked at me with that same quiet knowing she'd had since the very beginning. Daddy, she said, even if I ever see her again, I won't be scared. I know, because I have my voice now. Yes, you do. And you hear it. I always will. She closed her eyes with a contented sigh, fingers still curled around her teddy bear, the tablet resting peacefully in her drawer like an old journal no longer needed but never forgotten. And that was it. That was everything.